help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and welcome to the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. We hope you are doing well. If you have not yet subscribed to the YouTube page, you can do so. By the way, this year we're having a record year for podcast downloads, and then of course we added the video version so that everybody could see my co-host, Mr. Steve Carlin. Steve, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Glad to be here in the great state of Texas.
Yes, if we're in here together, it means you're in Texas. So we are in the HQ of 40 Days for Life, the now closed Planned Parenthood abortion facility where 40 Days for Life first began. And we know some of you requested a video version of the podcast. Many people did not, but
You're getting it anyway.
You're getting it anyway. And so whether you want to see us or don't want to see us, you can see us on the YouTube page. We've had a lot of stuff, a lot of good videos come out too. So be sure to subscribe to YouTube. Little insider baseball, and we're going to talk baseball today. We have a very controversial thing we need to cover before we get into our topic, which is Planned Parenthood trying to sexualize your kids. Since that's not controversial enough, we're going to talk about something else before then. Insider Baseball, if you subscribe to the YouTube page, you get the podcast a day early.
Yeah, you'll get all the videos a little bit earlier than we promote them. Sometimes we've got late breaking stuff, so if there's some big breaking news story that comes today, you're not going to get it yesterday. But yeah, we're going to make that available earlier to the subscribers as an exclusive benefit.
So Steve and I are a lot alike, but we're also very different. And one of the differences that I'm angry about, because it hinders our relationship, is you haven't seen any movies.
Correct.
However, that is made up somewhat by your unnecessary but respectable sports knowledge that is quite phenomenal. Like, I like sports, but you read books on sports. So it's like I like history and somebody has a PhD in history. It's totally different. And you just leave me. Like, you read the book Moneyball. Yes. Excellent book. How many sports books have you read in your life? Not counting like kids' books, but like real books.
I don't know. When I was a kid and a high school student, I'd read them all the time. Now, not terribly often, but I don't know, maybe a couple a year now, and more than that back in the day.
So that's encouraging. We did a podcast. This is going back to one of your great flaws as a human being. We're both 90s kids, okay? And we did a podcast on the top 10, I don't know how many movies we put in, the pro-life movies that aren't like pro-life movies, so not October Baby or Bella or Unplanned, but just movies that have a pro-life message. We had Terminator 2 in there, highly controversial. I've defended it and refuted a lot of people, and they've converted to believe that Terminator 2 is indeed a pro-life movie. And if you don't believe that, that's what Skynet wants you to believe, that it's not a pro-life movie, so that Skynet can take over. So we did that podcast. Matt's a movie guy. You don't know any movies, so we had you on sort of for the comic relief. We're naming movies that you haven't seen.
The night before I'd seen a couple of them, and the night before I watched Terminator 1.
Yes.
And this is where I told my wife, I need to at least get one of these movies in before we record on Monday. And I think Schwarzenegger just absolutely eviscerates this guy like 30 seconds into the movie. And Laura just looked at me and said, this is the pro-life movie you're watching for work?
Terminator 2 is the pro-life movie, which I would have gone it. Well, I would just throw Terminator 1 in there too because it builds on the story. But Terminator 2, it's like the greatest sequel in the history of movies. Like you and I love The Godfather, but Godfather 2 is way overrated. Terminator 2 is phenomenal. It's the #1 action movie of all time too. So what happened was you didn't like the first one, so you haven't seen the second one.
Exactly.
Okay. Here's the deal. And you are welcome to participate in this, and I want you to email 40 Days for Life, podcast@40daysforlife.com if you don't know who these people are. I'm going to go over 90s movie characters who everyone on earth knows. And I think you're going to know some. Like, this is hopeful. Then we're going to go over some 90s sports figures and events and see if you know those. And they're not gimmies. They're not like, and who was the home run battle between in 1990? It's not going to be like McGuire and Sammy Sosa. It's going to be like second or third tier.
Well, I'm excited about this. You have been excited about this all day, and I don't really know much about what's coming, but I am very excited about it.
The first 90s character, Steve, you're going to tell me who he is. Andy Dufresne.
Is that a guy in Shawshank?
No! Shocked! This is awesome! I can't believe it.
Here is.
How did you know that? You haven't seen Shawshank. Admit that. Looking at the camera.
I have not seen Shawshank Redemption. I know that.
How do you know who Andy Dufresne is?
Honest to goodness, I know that because I read a sports book that was talking about the Shawshank Redemption.
Was it like by Bill Simmons?
Yes.
So, okay, never mind. Okay, that doesn't count. Number 2, Colonel Jessup. Who is Colonel Jessup?
I'm just going to have to take a guess here. Was he in Saving Private Ryan?
No.
Okay.
John, our producer, knows all these behind the scenes. Okay, Colonel Jessup. Colonel Jessup is the rather angry, but you're glad he's on our side, borderline, or actually pretty corrupt colonel in A Few Good Men played by Jack Nicholson.
Okay.
Jack Nicholson's in the movie for like 14 minutes, and it's the greatest 14 minutes.
Is that You Can't Handle the Truth?
Yeah, you
All
got
right.
it. That's Colonel Jessup. Okay. You got to do. You have no excuse for this.
Ooh.
Who is John Connor?
Terminator?
Hey! There we go!
I did watch that one for the podcast.
You're 2 for
Wouldn't watch it again.
You're 2 for 3.
I'm exceeding expectations.
If you don't get this, we're canceling the podcast. This is anti-American if you don't know this. There's a lot on this. Remember, we're sticking to the 90s because I'm trying to be as fair as possible. We could go like Quinn, right? From Jaws. We're not doing any of that. This is the 90s. Lieutenant Dan.
Forrest Gump.
Boom. Richard Kimball.
Was he the guy who played Mini-Me in the Austin Powers trilogy?
Oh, man. I didn't kill my wife. I don't care. The Fugitive.
Okay. Was there a one-armed man in that one?
Yes. No one knows
I'm
his
on the right
name. He's
track.
the one-on man. I really gave you a shot at Richard Kimball, but I'm so impressed by Andy Dufresne because I know you haven't seen Shawshank Redemption. Okay. I feel myself getting angry. Jack and Rose.
Titanic.
Very good.
I know that one because that movie, the previews started coming out for it, and my dad said, this looks like the stupidest movie ever. Nobody's going to go watch this. And then it was a record for like 25 years for how many people went to see it in the box office.
The next one is for the viewers. I'm not going to reveal who it is.
Ooh.
I give you...
So do I just say yes or no whether I know
If
who
you
it is?
if you get this one...
Ooh.
Gosh. I'm going to... If you get this one, I will buy you a T-shirt from Buc-ee's.
Ooh. All right, pressure's on.
Yeah. that's the end. Not a car or anything. Like a T-shirt from Buc-ee's. I'm not going to reveal who this is, but if you know who it is, this is a little into the weeds, but oh man, gold. If you know who he is, email podcast@40daysforlife.com. Who is Kaiser Sose?
I'm not getting a shirt for Buck.
Okay, no shirt for Buck. Kaiser Sose. If you know who he is, John, the producer, knows who he is, but he doesn't count. Kaiser Sose, email podcast@40daysforlife.com. Rod Tidwell.
Was he the wide receiver in Jerry Maguire?
Boom! We end on a high note. All right. Very good. Very
He's got
good.
his Quan or whatever?
Yes. Okay.
Show me the money.
Show me the money. Okay.
I feel like I came through that pretty good. Could have been worse.
I'm grading you.
And judging me at the same time.
The judgment is all over the place. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. You got 4 out of 7. It's still a failing grade, I think, in most schools. So you got an F. And these are like...
It's like an F+.
Here's the deal. I think the viewer... I'm going to speak for the viewer. Colonel Jessup is inexcusable.
Okay.
And I would say that's like 1A and 1B of Richard Kimball. Because even if you haven't seen The Fugitive, which, by the way, in The Fugitive, there's a scene of St. Patrick's Day parade, and they actually filmed it, and they didn't coordinate with the parade because they wanted to be more real. So they're like following Harrison Ford through a St. Patrick's Day parade in Chicago, and people are like looking, like, oh my gosh, that's Harrison Ford. When in the movie it works because they're looking, because they're like, oh, that's Richard Kimball. But you don't even know who Richard Kimball is. You got Rod Tidwell. That was a little bit of a gimme. Okay. Now for the sports of the 90s.
This is where I'm actually more worried about letting you down.
Yeah, because this is now the expectation. You can miss some of these. Some of these are I don't know all that you know. I just know you know a lot. Who is John Riggins?
Redskins. I don't know if you can say that anymore. Washington football team.
No, Redskin. We're fine with the Redskins.
All right.
Okay. All right. So who is he? Running back
for the Redskins.
Who's Kevin Brown?
Oh, he was a pitcher. He was on the Marlins. He was on the Yankees. I think he won a World Series.
And he has a record. He set the first record, actually.
I don't know that record.
He got a $114 million contract. I think he was the first pitcher to break $100 million. Ernest Givens. Not a gimme.
Do not know him.
Wide receiver for the Houston Oilers in the early 90s. Okay. I'm a Cowboys fan, so I left. There's no Cowboys, there's no Packers. Tom Hinkie.
Don't know him either.
Whoa! No way! He won the MVP of the World Series with the Yankees as the closer.
Really?
Yes.
Never heard of him.
And the stupid Texas Rangers signed him to this huge deal, and he was terrible. That's probably why you. He was an all-star.
Tom Hinkie?
Tom Hinkie.
All right.
Mario Ellie. I couldn't give you gimmies on that. I couldn't be like Michael Jordan. Mario Ellie.
Race car driver?
Oh! You missed it.
Missed it. I'm now falling below 500.
No, this is shocking. This is like when the Giants started upsetting the Patriots, who were undefeated in the Super Bowl. Steve Atwater.
Oh, Broncos safety.
Okay. This is a quick reference. What college did Deion Sanders go to?
Florida State.
Who originally set the record for stolen bases and played for the Oakland A's?
Ricky Henderson.
What two players? This is where you have an opportunity to like come back in the fourth quarter. All right, what two iconic players were traded for each other twice between the Texas Rangers and the Baltimore Orioles? They're both first basemen.
Rafael Palmeiro?
And, gosh, that's the hard one.
That's a hard one.
Palmeiro is the hard one. They were traded for each other, Texas, and then, like, 7 years later, the same trade happened. They swapped them out again.
Eddie Murray?
No, but that's a good guess.
Okay.
It was Will Clark.
Oh.
Wow. Okay, that was a tough one. This is like, I'm just trying to punish you. If you know this, you may know it because you hate them. I'll just give you a clue. Who is Cap Boso? Real name.
From the 90s? This sounds like a guy who like played baseball in 1917 and they had the gloves with all the individual fingers on them. I have no idea who that is.
He was the tight end for the Chicago Bears in the early 90s. So. All right, there we go. That's it.
Now for something completely different.
I'm going to give you that trade. That Palmero was, that counts. You got Atwater. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. You went 500 on that.
And over 500. That's like two Fs, but.
Those were harder. Ernest Givens, I thought you would get. So let me ask you, because now I think we just had a revelation that for sure the viewer can see. You didn't play Tecmo Bowl or Super Tecmo Bowl.
So here's where I diverge. Everybody talks about Super Tecmo Bowl for the regular Nintendo. I had it for the Super Nintendo, so a little bit different.
Yeah, no, you missed it. You missed Cat Boso. He wasn't very. This was just like if you knew who he was, it's over. I should have offered a Bucky's T-shirt. Okay, come on. First off, email if you know who Kaiser Sose is. You got to go watch The Fugitive.
All right.
And you got to go. You've never seen A Few Good Men, ever.
No. I may have seen The Fugitive.
What does that mean? I may have seen it. It has like an 8-minute train wreck. How do you forget that?
Maybe I didn't.
Maybe I didn't. Oh no, that was Bill and Ted. Okay, that was a little bit of fun because now we have to get into this. Planned Parenthood is coming for your kids. The schools are pushing to sexualize your children. This isn't new, unfortunately. It's something we've talked about a lot. It's something that we've exposed in ads and different things throughout the years. But the problem with there's abortion and then there's the big picture of abortion, which is a true hatred of children and the family and the innocence of children and the innocence of the family. And so we have to, corrupt the kids, get them on contraception, get them coming into Planned Parenthood. We do other services. And then when they get pregnant, you can have an abortion. But the indoctrination is something we're going to cover today. And this is very relevant because we see, I think it's very positive, and Youngkin in Virginia won on this, which is this groundswelling of parents fed up with school boards and school districts and all this transgender nonsense. And they're actually starting to stand up. It's probably 25 years too late on some of these issues with parents not standing up. But it's not on the transgender. But we need to do it with Planned Parenthood. Here in our headquarters in College Station, Texas, we had Planned Parenthood thrown out of the public schools. And a lot of places have duplicated that. And you can get them thrown out if you just, unfortunately, show and share some of the stuff that we're going to share today. But you mentioned earlier that Planned Parenthood and legislators and school boards across the country are adopting what's called a national sex education standard.
National sex education standard. These are essentially, you've got to have your proficiency in math, you've got to have your proficiency in science, in reading, in English, and all of these different topics, and they want your children to be educated in sex the same way that they are the same way I'd like to say that they're educated in math and science. There's a lot of illiteracy in the foundational, the 3 R's. They're not being taught too much anymore, but we're going to definitely put sex in the schools according to these standards.
Okay, I don't want to read some of this. I'm going to read some of this. Okay, so number one, basically, we're going to spare you. This is 76 pages long.
76 pages. Read it all.
That's why you don't.
That's
why you don't know who Richard Kimball is. Okay, so the national sex education standards are nearly impossible to read. There's 17 pages of impossible to read theory.
just theory on their methods and their pedagogy and all these different words that you don't really understand them. But
like sex according to us.
Not even just sex, but just they get the whole woke agenda is there. We're talking equality, equity. We're talking, lived experience. We're talking about evidence-based. Like all these words, I assume have meanings, but in the context of these 17 pages, you don't really know what they're ever saying throughout the entire thing.
Okay.
You could take a random text generator and put a dictionary in, and that's what this looks like.
And we have an example. Sorry, but we have one. Sex education should acknowledge the role that structural and contextual factors, personal, interpersonal, social, economic, and cultural, play in shaping an adolescent's sexual motivations and behaviors, with the fundamental goal of removing economic, racial, ethnic, gender, sexual orientation, and ability-related disparities in adolescent sexual health.
I'm glad we cleared that up.
It makes sense now. We're not putting that on the screen.
I think it's interesting. Why is it like this? Marxists love this stuff. If you ever see something and I think it just makes it so easy to kind of like hide behind, because they can come in and they're going to sexualize your kids straight up. That's what we're going to go through in a moment. But when you put it in terminology like that, I don't know what that means. It doesn't sound sexual to me.
But one way to spread propaganda and to convince people of your point is to rise above. Avoid anything substantive. Rise above and have a tone, which is, hello, stupid people who know nothing. You will now hear from educated people who know everything. And we will use so many words and so many commas that you won't have a clue what we're talking about, but you won't be able to help yourself because you're so ignorant, but to believe us. And that's what it is.
It sounds sophisticated. It's hard to refute. And then people won't read it. I was like ready to bail on this, and then I realized, oh yeah, I'm doing this for a reason. We have to do the podcast.
I have a job. You should have just quit and watched A Few Good Men.
Yeah. Richard Kimball, is he a good guy or a bad guy?
Richard, stop. You're embarrassing yourself in the podcast. I'm not revealing that.
Okay.
You need to go.
Well, if he's a bad guy, he's probably responsible for it, and if he's the good guy, then he would be fighting this.
Well, you're gonna really feel bad after you watch The Fugitive. Okay, it is Marxist. It is I guess part of the big picture when we go through this stuff. Anytime anything with children. Not unborn children, but born children. Remember, we don't care about the born children. That's the accusation. But we don't produce garbage like this. They do. Anytime children come up, it really shows, obviously, typically mental or emotional abuse of a child. It's easier to lead to physical abuse. But if you physically abuse children or dehumanize them and kill them in the womb, the emotional abuse is easy. Mm-hmm. And that's Planned Parenthood has a long, long history of that. Okay, so in this report, you said there's a lot of Trojan horses.
Yeah, no pun intended on that. They talk about health a lot because who opposes health, right? We need sex education and sexual health education, because who in their right mind is going to oppose health and education? Sound like nice things, but what does that entail? Part of the vision is to increase the acceptance of students who identify as LGBTQ. That's not education and that's not health. That's straight up ideology that's being imposed on students in the classroom from a very young age. Some of these standards apply to kids as young as kindergarten.
Mercy. And, you can take this garbage to your school board, and obviously that's one of our big call to actions with this. But I think also there's an apologetic sense, which we always cover on the podcast, the what to say when factor, which is asking your abortion supporters if they support this. This is actually one of the great advantages of Planned Parenthood being a national brand. It hurts us on a lot of fronts because people are like, Planned Parenthood, they're great. I mean, they're everywhere. They're big. They get help from the government, and they help women, and they're Planned Parenthood. The bad thing is what's bad for everybody. Like Taco Bell, there's some rotten burrito, and a kid gets sick. It's bad for all Taco Bells. That didn't happen. I'm just
That's why I don't eat lettuce. They're always having that bacteria outbreak or whatever.
Just give me the Give me the refried beans and the really bad version of a tortilla. I'm going to eat it anyways. With the sauce, the mild sauce or the hot sauce in the little packets. Fortunately, all that stuff's really good for you. But this is where they go with it. Okay, so the program has standards for students to engage in advocacy, because that's what students want to do. Not just accepting the sex education, but requiring them to assist with the indoctrination of their peers. So you're the weirdo if you kind of raise your hand and you're like, hey, is anyone else freaked out by this?
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you look at the standards themselves, again, they're very vague, so it's difficult to say in a lot of cases what exactly is going on in the schools. But the acceptance of LGBTQ students, the acceptance of certain behaviors, lifestyles, all of these things, which maybe and probably are counter to what is the values that are being taught at home. You don't just have to, as a student, you're not marked proficient if you know the answers to XYZ question. You're marked as proficient if you are leading the way in establishing programs and establishing initiatives in the classroom. So it's not just the teachers pushing this, it's the teachers educating the students to push the LGBTQ agenda right there at school.
So I know a lot of their stuff is, hey, you could be gay or your buddy could be gay and that's okay and it's good and you should probably experiment in being gay. Does that translate also into the woke stuff? Do they do the whole, hey, you're a little white kid, you need to apologize for that because you tried to lock up Johnny's grandpa?
Yeah, all of that is there. The full progressive political package is there. It says the national sex education standards aim to ground the educational experience in social justice and equity, honoring the diversity of students, racial, ethnic, gender, orientation, ability, socioeconomic, as well as academic, and promote the whole diversity and inclusion agenda. So
that's the Trojan horse.
Yeah, it sounds like education, sounds like health. I can think, Sean, here's a story that I don't know if I've told you this before, but my kids go to Catholic school. This is before we moved to where we live right now, but we had a great Catholic church, great Catholic pastor, okay school. The pastors kind of had to do some cleanup there, and I got wind that there was going to be like a human growth and development curriculum presented to the students. And so I kind of asked the teachers about it, like, can you tell me a little bit more about this? They said, oh, it's hygiene. We're going to make sure the boys are wearing deodorant in 4th grade, that type of thing. But we can share you the curriculum if you want. And I said, yeah, I very much would like to see that. And the teacher gave me the link to the video, which I could find online, which was a little post-it that said youtube.com. Oh, great, I'll scour the whole YouTube. Bottom line is, eventually, like 3 days before this was going to be presented in the Catholic school, I was able to finally find the curriculum. I took it to my pastor, who had been completely misled and deceived the entire way by the teachers, and sat down with him and said, hey, I understand there's a lot of gobbledygook here that doesn't make any sense. You can't read it, I can't read it, but here's the video that I found, and here's the teachers, accompanying materials that I found. There's a lot of stuff, again, it doesn't sound that bad, but when you see how it's actually implemented in practice, these are things that don't belong in a Catholic school, and they don't belong in any school.
Awesome. And good for you for doing it.
Well, here's what happened. He kind of pushed back. He's like, look, I talked to the teachers. They said this was about hygiene. So I gave him the information, and he put his head in his hands, and he said, they told me it was about hygiene. And there was very little time left, and so he didn't have time to cancel it because the offices were closed. And so the Planned Parenthood sort of affiliated educator shows up at our school, and he was there waiting for her and sent her home.
Nice! Hey! That's a good pastor.
Yeah.
That's a great story. No, you haven't told me that yet. That's really awesome. That's super awesome. And that's what we have to do. And it's hard because you get stuff. It happened at my kid's school, and I was like the opposite. I thought, this is all Planned Parenthood propaganda, sex education. And then I looked into it, and it was actually a really good program. Okay. There was nothing wrong. So Mary Lisa's like, you need to chill out. But that's the problem, is that now everybody's, we're kind of walking on eggshells because you hear all these stories, or you don't look into it, and underneath all the gobbledygook, which you mentioned, you'll find a video, you'll find something.
Here's an example of
Or
how
you
it can be
find
kind of obscured and how it can be kind of a Trojan horse. The program teaches that denial of resources or access to services is violence, that it's literally violence. And in a way that sounds good, right? We had the whole civil rights movement so that you can't deny access to the bus or to the water fountain to people of color. Great. That's the thing we should be doing. But where do we see that sort of misappropriated now? Now you're the baker in Colorado who doesn't want to make the gay wedding cake, and now that isn't just a civil rights violation. That is, according to this program that is being taught in your kids' schools, that is violence.
Here's another part of that, and we harp on this. We've done it with whether it's the FBI or the DOJ, but it's within, I would say, those who identify as homosexuals on a certain level. We've talked about how they're not in favor of the trans stuff, and we've talked to a lot of gay people, and they'll pull you aside and say, no, this is all garbage. Like, I'm a dude and I like dudes. Gender's important to me. That's why I'm gay. It's like the most practical thing you'll ever hear. But we got to support these people, or you'll meet. There's a lot of people that identify as homosexual who are pro-life or even pro-Trump. But the gay baker thing, because it's this huge celebrated victory, and they targeted and tortured this poor guy.
And continue to do so.
Continue to do so today. And I just have to think, because we don't cast everybody off to hell, I don't know. There has to be a maybe not the majority, I don't know, but a significant number of these the homosexual crowd that's like, this is how we're getting our cause through. Mm-hmm. I mean, they respect religious liberty. I mean, the guy doesn't believe in our lifestyle. What's wrong with that? We're going to punish him?
All of this, from the cake baker to the wedding florist to the sex education standards, is because they come in, this sort of progressive left that's anti-family, waging war on children, waging war on families, on marriage and everything. They kind of come in under this guise and this notion of like, look, we just want to be able to live our lives. We want to be able to love who we want to love. And they've won pretty much every victory now. Gay marriage has been legal in the U.S. since 2015. In some states, a lot longer than that. Like, they've won every victory. There are no more victories to win, and yet their consciences pursue them. And whether that's with the homosexual agenda or abortion, it's no longer enough for it to just be allowed, but because their consciences pursue them, now it must be celebrated. And to any last opportunity there is for their conscience to be telling them, you know what, this lifestyle isn't right, they're going to blame you, they're going to blame me, they're going to blame you listening and watching this podcast right now, because if we would only celebrate them, then they wouldn't feel guilty about these things that they're doing.
And if you're unreasonable, then nothing what we say matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're reasonable, you know that the Old Testament, and you know that the Bible says that homosexual acts are a sin. So that's not really a profound thing. That's a very common belief for people who believe in the Bible, that it's a sin against God. Doesn't mean you're horrible. I know we're not allowed to love the sinner and hate the sin anymore, but I think there has to be a segment. I don't know this. Maybe I'm just being totally naive, but there has to be a significant amount of homosexual people that are like, I understand Christians that don't agree with our lifestyle. I mean, they read the Bible. I don't interpret it that way, but they do. And the Bible teaches against these acts. We celebrate these acts. We, think they're the greatest ever and they're our identity, and they're against that. That doesn't mean we torture those people for following their religious beliefs. And so I think it definitely ties in. That definitely ties in. Because there has not been a more militant movement in the last 25 years.
Who are they trying to convince?
The homosexuals. They have, and look, we've looked at how they do it. I don't agree with it. I think it's awful, and I think it's shameful. I think it has to be forced, honestly. They rejected gay marriage twice in California when it was a referendum. In 2008, Obama was against gay marriage. I mean, I think they're bullies, honestly, and they pushed a lot of this stuff through. And the baker guy is perfect sacrificial lamb, example number one. But I just think that when you get into sexualizing children and pushing all this stuff on them, it's forced, and it has to be.
We don't need to go and establish like the national meat education standards where we're teaching kids like, okay, there's some people out there who are vegans and that's violent because they're going to make you feel guilty for eating ribs. I think they're really trying to convince themselves like we can do things that other people are opposed to, and we don't need to go like push and threaten and cancel them until they agree that ribs are great.
And this is all it is. It's not the other side. It's not marriages for life. Mm-hmm. Marriage is between a man and a woman, and it's a commitment for life, and it's a struggle, whatever you want to say. They don't even cover that. It's all like the throwing out the old guard, the old hat, as John Party sings about. This is what John Party's talking about. But the people supporting this should have immediate concern. Number one, we mentioned the lobbying. Planned Parenthood's lobbying in favor of legislation that implements all of this. Number two, it's obviously endorsed by all the LGBT groups and all that.
Reproductive justice advocates.
Reproductive justice. I got to tell you, and I said this when they overturned Roe because
I feel a rant coming.
No. It's not a rant. It's a compliment.
Okay.
It's a positive thing. I like reproductive justice. Reproductive justice made a comeback. Or maybe it was invented. I don't think it was. I don't know. Was it left over from 2020 when everything was an injustice?
I think it existed before that.
Okay. But somebody's making reproductive justice great again. It's like the Trump version of the reproductive justice movement. And when Dobbs overturned Roe, reproductive justice became just like, you couldn't order a coffee unless you said reproductive justice. And,
how would you like your coffee? Black?
Reproductive justice. No. Yeah. So I like that because do you know what reproductive justice means?
I mean, I know what it's used to mean. It just
No.
means abortion,
What does it
right?
mean?
It means abortion.
No, you don't know that.
Oh,
you don't know what it
I
means.
see what you're saying, yeah. Well, this was, we were trying to figure out where it came from. Who was big on this was Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
She was big on the reproductive justice because it's just like freedom of worship kind of replaced freedom of religion, that type of thing. Yeah.
Yes. But reproductive justice is never abstaining from sex until marriage. It's never not having an abortion. It's never not using contraception. It's never adopting children. Reproductive justice is always, I want to do whatever the heck I want. But no one can define it. It's applied to stuff like this all the time, and reproductive justice is coming to an argument near you.
And that's why we're pointing out who is in favor of this, because we mentioned the Trojan horses, we mentioned the unreadable, impossible to understand Marxist psychobabble that permeates this document. If you know nothing else about the national sex education standards, but you know that Planned Parenthood is full-throated support of it, that should be enough to tell us this isn't something we want our kids being exposed to.
Exactly. Okay, number 4. This whole program prematurely sexualizes children. Okay, so K2, not a typo.
You have a kindergartner right now?
Yes.
Okay, I've got one that will be next year.
I've had a kindergartner for like a decade.
Yeah.
But yes. K2. Of course, this isn't in our schools. Remember, I thought it was. I was like throwing rants, and the program was actually good. Okay, K2, teach kids the name of their genitals. Why does this need to be done in school?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that.
Okay. We're going to move on from that because that's a rabbit trail. Teaches third graders about masturbation, intercourse, IVF, which we've covered, surrogacy. Third graders need to know about surrogacy for sure. And STDs.
Yeah, I don't have a third grader. I will next year.
My third grader would be terrified at all of those. Yeah.
What do we got here? Grades 6 through 8, children are taught to describe and children are taught how to use various barrier methods of contraception, including some, Sean, that I had never heard of before, and I didn't until I was like, I Googled it, and I really wish that I didn't Google it, Sean.
Steve's Googling random methods of contraception.
It's one of those many things where if I were doing it on any other job, it would be grounds for immediate dismissal.
Yeah.
Here's your box. You'll be escorted out.
You're a computer programmer at IBM, and you're Googling random new methods of contraception on your lunch break. Okay. So again, the K through 2 was naming the genitals, and then the third graders were the masturbation, intercourse, IVF, surrogacy. How in the world could you explain IVF to a third grader? I'm going to try to do it. I'll do it in the right context.
Well, there's different types of families, Sean.
They're not going to understand that the baby grows in a lab somewhere.
I think that's the point. You get people kind of in this fervor, and they're going to be ready to join the cancel culture mob before they even understand what DNA is.
DNA. Let's go back to the 90s movies references.
Ooh.
The only way I think to do it is to explain Jurassic Park, because they've all seen Jurassic Park, most third graders. And so you're like, hey, remember? And now that's what you're doing. But Jurassic Park was bad. That's why Michael Crichton wrote it. That's the whole point. You have no ethics, and you do it without asking whether you should, but whether you could. That's the message of Jurassic Park, and yet that's the only way to explain IVF to a third grader.
Yeah.
I would bet you $1 million the Planned Parenthood creep who's teaching these third graders is using Jurassic Park. And it takes one third grader to be like, but wasn't that wrong?
Yeah, the thing.
Remember the dinosaurs ate everybody?
These standards, if you are teaching kids these things and you're like a pervert in a trench coat at the park, you're getting arrested. But if you have an
With all due
education
respect
degree,
to those who have trench coats.
but if you've got an education degree, then you're getting funding from whatever initiative.
But the reason we're doing this is because what happens is I think people, they get so frustrated. We don't need to get frustrated. We need to take action. I think they watch too much news, and they see all the drag queens and these kids, and some of these people just absolutely need to be prosecuted for child abuse. And they're just like, oh, it's awful. But I think the trans insanity in the school board debate, it's great because it's caused parents to go to school boards, but we can't leave this out. This needs to be tacked on. And then, by the way, it needs to be a litany. It didn't start with the trans people. You're teaching my kid about IVF. All that stuff, the abortion, Planned Parenthood, sex ed part seems so dated, doesn't it? Because they're doing drag queen, whatever.
I think there's a danger at times to us becoming desensitized. Every day there's a terrible headline in the news about the drag queens or, selling fetal body parts or abortions out the drive-through window at CVS. These are sometimes as uncomfortable as it is, and I didn't really enjoy preparing for this podcast, and other than the sports stuff, I'm not sure I enjoy doing this podcast, but we need to do this because
and even the sports stuff didn't go that well for you.
We're batting not so high today. Not so high. But I think we need to sometimes dig into this stuff so that we don't just kind of be like, oh yeah, the news is bad. What a crazy time we live in. I think we need to be prepared so that, parents listening right now, you may be at a great Catholic school, but you better check out what your kids are learning, even if it's a Catholic or a Christian school, and certainly if it's not.
And if you're in a public school, go, and if you just pay taxes, you can be a homeschooler, you can do this because you still pay taxes. You have a say at these school board meetings. Matt Walsh started doing that, and he didn't go to school. They homeschool. So you can go to the meetings and bring this up because it's all recorded. It's very effective. We did it here. It doesn't matter what school you're at. You just have to. I still think 50% of the stuff never makes it in if they know parents are watching. Because it's not, there's a lot of great teachers and a lot of great school educators. There's a lot of horrible ones that need to go. And we don't have time to get into the corruption of the education in America. But if you're just watching and paying attention, it goes a long, long way. So, okay, next on our list. I'm getting sick of saying this, but the National Sex Education Standards are also pushing the LGBT agenda on kids starting at a very early age, including K2. Again, K2 is where they start. And they're also teaching them preferred pronouns, all of these things.
Gender is a binary social, or the gender binary is a social construct, I think is in there.
I'm going to make you read that sentence from this document. Read that opening sentence.
Sex education should avoid cis-normative, heteronormative approaches.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Why? Why should it?
Okay. K2 families are taught the importance of showing respect for all different kinds of families, including nuclear families, same-gender parent households, and interracial households.
Oh, because they're the same, right? Interracial household is the same as
yeah. The using race to justify the two gay parents is a very common thing.
Yeah.
Because we're all so different. What do you mean? Well, his mom is white and his dad is black, which is very common now. That's not controversial now, I don't think.
I got a question for you, Sean. We talked about the third graders in Jurassic Park and how do you explain in vitro fertilization? How do you, if you're a teacher and you are following the national sex education standards, how do you explain to a third grader, as you're supposed to do, about puberty blockers? I don't even know how to explain puberty to them, but I don't know.
Much less how to block it.
Yeah.
You can't. I don't think you can. I think you can manipulate, but even if two dudes that adopt a kid or two women that adopt a kid, because they're like, yeah, but where is his dad? Now you can do it at a certain level because they're not aware of the biology. Mm-hmm. But eventually you're going to hit a point where you're like, hey, I know 5 years ago you said that Sally had two dads, but like, really, where is the mom? Mm-hmm. You're like, well, remember, they just have two dads. Yeah, but everybody biologically has a mom. Like, where's the mom? The mom's in the Ukraine. They paid her $10,000.
Yeah.
And the kid's like, what?
She may or may not be permanently sterile due to the procedure for harvesting those eggs because nobody in our country would undergo that procedure.
TMI yet, little Johnny? Okay. Grades 3 through 5 teaches students about puberty blockers and the difference between gender identity and sex assigned at birth. We've done the transgender stuff. You can look it up. We're going to continue to do it, but we did a whole breakdown of the transgender stuff and just the nonsense and how we don't have to participate in the charade. Mm-hmm. If you're born a girl, you're a girl. And there is nothing wrong with that, by the way. And if you're born a boy, you're a boy. And there's nothing wrong with that either. And they want to kill the tomboy. That is their goal. They want to kill the tomboy, like Magua from Last of the Mohicans, somebody else you don't know. They want to kill the tomboy, and they want to kill the male artist. So if you're good at directing movies, you're good at painting, you're good at singing, and you're a dude, no. We got to do the snip. You're really supposed to be a girl.
Yeah.
So, okay. Grades 6 through 8. Kids need to be able to explain what it means to be bisexual, queer, two-spirit. Queer is back. You weren't supposed to say it. Then you could say it. Then you weren't supposed to say it. Now you can say it again. Two-spirit. I've never heard that.
I think there's some kind of like thing in some indigenous American culture where you could be two-spirit.
Okay. How many spirits are you?
Just one.
Okay. And pansexual.
One of the neighbor kids came up and told my kids they're pansexual. We're talking like a 4th grader. Oh, good to know. Note for the listeners and viewers, don't move to Madison, Wisconsin.
Even though you're getting a Buc-ee's. Bucky is not pansexual.
No.
Bucky the Beaver, he's not pansexual. He's a male beaver, and has great gas stations. They also have a program that teaches gender binary. That gender binary is a social construct.
Yeah, just made up entirely. Whole cloth by white colonialists, I assume.
Moving on. The national sex education standards create a bias against life and in favor of abortion. Okay, page 6. It lumps in pregnancy among many outcomes like getting HIV.
Same thing, right? They both affect you for life.
Well, this goes into the pregnancy as a disease. Mm-hmm. But the pregnancy as a disease goes against natural law because when you do the family group text and your cousin, Susie, says, hey, me and Tommy are having another baby due in March. It's going to be awesome. And everybody's like, oh my God, that's so cool. That's all. He could have the same birthday as Uncle Earl and blah, blah, blah. So it's good. It's not a disease then.
No.
It's not like saying we have the flu.
Yeah. Nobody's sending that group text like, hey, I got HIV.
Gosh.
I hope not. At least.
No.
Heck of a
Because
family
that's
reunion.
a disease.
Yeah.
And pregnancy's not. Okay. Grades 6 through 8 must be taught to identify medically accurate sources of information about prenatal care.
Oh, so this is interesting.
That's new to me. You start seeing a picture of a baby with their little fingers and toes. You need to make sure it's credible.
Yeah.
Dang, that's got a little 1930s Germany to it.
So if you're watching this episode, it's probably on YouTube, and you'll probably see that little disclaimer that YouTube
man,
has put up.
if they've gotten this far, we really got to hand it to YouTube.
So they're doing that, and now it's going into the schools. Now the whole fake news craze has spread into, your schools are actually using this funding, taxpayer funding, grant funding, whatever. But your schools are out there educating your kids that pregnancy help centers are unreliable. That's what this really is about.
Yep. Any source about prenatal care. What about the documentary that the National Geographic did?
I don't know.
Interesting.
A lot of talk here about grades 11 and 12 taught to assess the skills they need to be an effective parent, which, again, this is one of those Trojan horse things, I think, Sean, where, yes, I think we want kids to, anyone who has a baby, we want them to know how to be an effective parent. But what's the application of it, particularly in high school? Oh, this is basically a educational curriculum designed to say, you've got your whole life ahead of you, you got to go to college, you wouldn't be an effective parent, you need to have an abortion. And in fact, just a couple of years earlier than that, the program teaches students that abortion is an option for pregnancy. So they're pushing abortion. They're telling you you're not equipped to be a parent. They're telling you pregnancy help centers are not credible sources of reproductive health information. It's all very clearly mapped out how to get from point A to the abortion facility.
When I first read that, and you may be able to relate at home, I thought it was like a program to help teen moms. Like, hey, we push abortion all day long and we love it, but we also have a program if somebody chooses life. We're going to teach them to be a parent.
Yeah.
But what it is, hey, you know what happens when you become a parent? You die. And they make it seem so miserable. Of course, it's challenging, but it's the dark side. And what's amazing? I think the viewers should be very encouraged because you read, and this actually isn't that old. Or isn't that new, I should say. But some of it is, obviously. We didn't have pansexuals when Richard Kimball was running around. Look at how many women choose life. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've done the stats on teen abortions. Way down. I mean, it's amazing how many people actually choose life with the onslaught of garbage that is coming at them. It's beautiful. It shows the grace of God and natural law and how he made us, that we actually don't want to just run in and have an abortion because...
And there are parts of the world that are like that.
Absolutely.
Eastern Europe, the communist bloc.
Totally. So
what we just covered here, though, in the schools where they're pushing abortion, that's where... Do you remember when Sue was on the podcast and she explained how, if the woman's on the fence about abortion, you just kind of grab her elbow, kind of pinch a little bit and say, honey, have you seen the price of diapers?
Yep. I remember Sue saying that, and bringing up Sue, that was one of those moments where I had about 1,000 of them in my life where Sue would be talking, and I'm like, I just can never actually imagine her working at Planned Parenthood. But those are the things that they did, and that's powerful. You seen the price of diapers lately? Which, the answer to that, no.
No.
Clueless how much a diaper costs.
I've had a kid in diapers for a decade, and I don't know what they cost.
I don't know what they
just
cost.
Put them in the cart.
You don't look at the price. You just know you need the big one, and we've Bought a lot of diapers. Okay, number 7. The NSES undermines parental authority. Okay, here we go. Here's a quote. The updated NSES have thoughtfully taken into consideration that young people, including young people who are pregnant or parenting, should have decision-making power in their reproductive health and their decision to determine if, when, and under what circumstances they do or do not want to parent. So it's up to you. Do you want to parent? Do you not want to parent? There's no difference between the two. It's white or wheat bread.
Yeah, birth control without parents' knowledge or consent.
Yeah, so that's basically what that is. Okay, under that, by grade 3, the program encourages students to go to trusted adults, including healthcare professionals, with questions on puberty and sexual health. The 3rd grade.
This is one of the points I made to my pastor when I was kind of opening his eyes to the program, is throughout this program, it was like, if you don't feel comfortable talking to mom and dad, find another trusted adult. And I'm thinking, as Catholics, we've had 20 years of hell getting through the scandal of people who are not appropriate around children, and now we're going to start sending the kids to talk to other adults about sexual topics. It's completely out of bounds. It is, the word grooming is thrown around a lot. I think this is grooming.
It's grooming, and there's a little big picture point that we can kind of close out on, which is we're playing with fire here, quite literally. I mean, I'm Irish, as you know, so I love fear, like good fear. And there needs to be a healthy fear of the Lord. And not when Steve Carlin, not when Sean Carney, not when Billy Graham or Mother Teresa say it, but when Jesus Christ says, it is better if you were never born than to hurt one of these little ones. We need to pause with things. I mean, fear of the Lord is a very healthy thing, right? Mm-hmm. The best reason not to sin is out of love of God. And when that fails in our frailty, fear of hell, fear of the devil, fear of wounding others, whatever it is, fear can send us in the right direction. Fear of getting in a car accident, so you wear your seatbelt. You think it's a stupid law, but you're like, I don't know. My buddy died in a car accident. He didn't have a seatbelt on. I'm going to put mine on. Fear can be very good. There is no fear of harming these children. This is absolute child abuse. They don't care. And it's aggressive. It's not neglect. It's not like you forgot to put the seatbelt on your kid. It's that you took it off. You positioned him in the front of the car so he'd go through the windshield, and you sped off and went down a cliff, and you killed him.
While you were on meth, probably.
Yeah. While you were on meth, and all you did was look around and say, I am doing this for the good of society.
And I think as we begin to wrap here, I think one of the fundamental points here is you see these stories in the news, and you think it's, oh gosh, I'm glad that's in Chicago. I'm glad that's in San Francisco. I'm glad that's in Seattle. You cannot, as parents, you cannot have that attitude. This is in your school. I grew up this isn't all that different from what I was taught when I was in school.
Really? You had this growing up, though?
1995, in a town of 2,000 people, yes, I had, I'd say 85% of this.
See, I didn't have any of this, and I was from a small town in East Texas in a Catholic school.
I was at a public school, and a lot of these things I was taught in elementary school, yeah.
I would have been clueless on this.
Because I see the headlines sometimes, like, God bless Fox News, but you have the Fox News headline, like, look what they're being taught in San Francisco now. And I'm like, I was taught that in literally a town named Hortonville, Wisconsin in 1995, 5th grade.
I would have been terrified of most of this stuff until middle school. I wouldn't have known. I would have thought it was made up. Yeah. I know some of it is made up, but
I was confused. I was like, I don't know. I left with more questions than answers. We'll say that.
Okay, now that you have been through that traumatic experience, we're gonna forgive your movie. Of course, the movies would have probably given you some clarity in life. This is like, this makes sense. Richard Kimball is innocent. So anyways, the call to action, people don't like doing it, but no matter where, I don't like doing it. But you got to ask your schools about this. Some of you know your schools and you checked into it, but definitely check into it. The worst thing you can do is say that you have no voice. The second worst thing is to know that you have a voice, but think I'm in the minority, so I can't say anything. That's nonsense. That's not all of this garbage, what we just went over with you. All of it was pushed by a minority group, shoving their agenda. You know, like 4% of Americans are homosexual? You would think half the country. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that the majority rules. We defend the minority. But the minority pushed this garbage. And when it's garbage, it needs to be called that. This isn't defending the little guy. This is corrupting a child. The child can grow up and they can determine what they think of homosexual act, whether they believe in the Bible, whether they believe in natural law, whether they think that, gay people should be married or not or whatever. They can have all their own opinions. They can curse the gay baker. They can defend the baker case. They can defend him. They can curse him. They can do whatever. But they should be allowed to grow up and not have this forced on them as children. And that's the child abuse, and we have to be their voices. So do look into your public schools, do look into your private schools, and get this out. I'll say, when you see the momentum, we just think we're always losing. We're not. A lot of this stuff has been thrown out of schools when parents bring it up.
We've long said that of all the social issues, we're losing on like the gay marriage, we're losing on the trans stuff. But in the schools, I think that's in addition to the pro-life. I think this is an area where we've got some real momentum.
I do too. We're winning. And right now, let's just do a shout out. He's been very good to us. He wrote the foreword to What to Say When. But God bless Matt Walsh. I mean, talk about a guy. We didn't have this. And you and I were in high school when all this stuff happened. But the onslaught of just the homosexual agenda, of not them like living their life, but them forcing it on everybody and saying, and you will accept me or else. You will accept my behavior or else. We're not allowed to just accept them. But there was no leader that said, this is my crusade, I'm doing this, and I'm never wavering. And Matt Walsh has done that with the trans stuff, and he's done a phenomenal job. And so it makes me grateful for him, for sure. But he just shouldn't be alone. So do check this out. We're going to put some of this in the show notes so you can check it out if you need to cite certain things. Thanks for enduring our humor to start this out. Now I'm sure the viewer is appreciative of that part of it. Little lighthearted banter on Steve's dilapidated experience as a 90s kid before we got into true dilapidation. So be sure to rate, review, and share this podcast, and we will see you next time.